another very interesting panel discussion coming your way. And this is where we will be having a dialogue with the international brands. We will be paving the way to the fifth largest destination for retail, India. We'll actually get to understand all about the unique challenges and the opportunities that the vast Indian market can present. We'll also understand more about the FDI strategies by the government that have managed to open roads for global retailers in order to join the race. So yes, we'll be bringing on board our set of speakers in a short while and get to learn from the international players the very reasons that make India the next big target market for global companies. Before we do that, once again, I'd like to urge you all that you're getting to experience here inside the conference hall or even at the MAPIC India, please don't forget to keep those tweets coming. Please share your experiences, your thoughts using the hashtag MAPICIndia2023. So with that, looks like we're all set. Looking at the rise of e-commerce as well as digital marketing in India that has made it easier for these set of brands to reach a wider audience. Let's get to hear it from the international brands themselves. And I'm going to get a quick thumbs up from the team, which means it's my cue to invite our speakers on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular session will be spearheaded once again by Mr. Naveen Jaggi, who is the President, Global Chair, Retail Advisory Services, GLL. And if I can also please invite our speakers on stage, may I please invite Mr. Daniel Spinath, Founder, Crepe Affair, London. May I also please invite Mr. Patrick Fallman, Partner, General Manager, Store Makers, Dubai. Mr. Stephen Chow, Managing Director, Can Design, Hong Kong. Mark McQuain, Founder, Vindico Retail, Pop Retail, and Wallstruck, US. And Jonathan York, Chief Asset Officer, Beyond Square Feet. We've got international presence right here in India, or may I say Bharat. Can we have a beautiful swagat as well? Let's have a round of applause. Please help me welcome our amazing set of speakers here. Let's try to understand from their point of view. Let's hear it from the international brands themselves as we deep dive into another very pertinent discussion coming your way. I'd like to humbly hand over the proceedings to Mr. Jaggi. Over to you, sir.
Well, thanks for inviting me back on the stage here. This will be my second and last time on the stage, so you're done with me after today. As I was saying a while ago, it's amazing to see the transformation and the progress that we've seen in India over the last 5 to 7 years, and nothing like this panel to really talk about those things that different experts look at when they think about coming to India. And so what we have today is a very diverse panel. We have retailers here, we have people who specialize in fit-outs, we have people who specialize in design for retail, and we have specialists who work with property owners to activate space. So we have a very diverse panel here. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, the company that they represent, where they're based, and then we'll have a conversation around why India today, some of the opportunities, challenges, what drives growth, and what each of these experts can tell you about the things you should be thinking about when you think about India retail. So I'm going to start off to my side here. Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you're based and what your company does.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm Stephen Chow from Can Design. I'm based in Hong Kong. My background, actually, we do architecture in design and interiors. We're mainly working for shopping malls and some high street retail. In the past, when I was start working in India, we helped Phoenix Groups to work on a series of market cities projects, including in Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune, and Chennai. And then just after COVID, since last time when I was there was already 5, 6 years ago, I feel like I got the passion that I would like to reconnect to the market. So here I am. Yep. So hope that we can share some fruitful insights to all of you today. Thank you.
Daniel?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Naveen. Yeah, my name is Daniel Spinath. I'm the founder of Crepe Affair, and we do crepes. Very thin French pancakes, as the name would suggest. Based in London, we are market leaders in the UK and in Europe, and we've branched out internationally as well. We're in the Middle East, and we are also going to be launching in the US over the next few months. Very happy to be here and to understand and to really explore the opportunities in the Indian market. And as Naveen has highlighted, the opportunities are tremendous. So very honored and very glad to be here today.
Mark?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark McQuain. I'm the founder of Vindico. We've been in India for about 3 years. We've been in Dubai for 16. Here we're fortunate to partner with Anurag. So we provide retail, design, and delivery services. We've been doing that around the world. We've delivered over 11,000 stores to date. I've also founded a company in Dubai, Pop Retail, where we take advantage of vacant spaces, work with landlords and the tenants to activate those spaces with new retailers looking to come into the market. And then we have another company that I founded in the U.S. Called Volstruct, and there we build different retail formats. We have mobile retail, tiny houses with retailers inside. So we've done a lot of different things, all very retail-centric. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Patrick?
Hello, I'm Patrick. I'm here on behalf of the Stall Makers Middle East. I also represent a group called the Umdash Group, who is basically a manufacturer for retail interiors. So we've got factories all over Europe and also in the Middle East, in Dubai, where I am based, to produce the fixtures and fittings for high-end retail boutiques and maisons. So we work with a lot of international brands, and especially from the luxury and premium segment. So we can really see the trends that you put at hard facts in your presentation earlier in actual cases where they are trying to get into the Indian market and looking for opportunities to do so and looking for assistance to do so. We see ourselves in the Middle East on the bridge into the Indian market from Europe. So for a lot of the European brands, we are on the doorstep, obviously from a language point of view and from a mentality point of view, cultural point of view. There's a very close connection between Dubai and India. So that makes us, in that sense, the perfect partner as well for a lot of the international brands to enter the Indian market. And yeah, we would like to learn more as well, obviously, from Indian brands that want to grow internationally. So I think there's huge opportunities, and your presentation earlier just demonstrated that.
Very good. And Jonathan?
Thank you, Naveen. It's wonderful to be back at work here in India. I am the Chief Asset Officer for Beyond Square Foot, working at Tex Valley and Erode. It's a very exciting project, and I'm mindful that Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities have traditionally been relatively starved of great retail opportunities, and I think this is going to change at lightning speed. I'm always been of the view as a property professional that I'm aware that retailers will always do their very best to evolve and participate and change in the environment in which they operate. The vicious reality is that us property people, we've got to make sure that retailers can do their job. Our job is really very, very simple, right? We've got to make sure that the retailers can do theirs.
You got to fulfill the demand by the consumer.
100%.
Right? Right.
100%.
So as you can see, we have a very, very impressive panel that touches on all aspects of retail, not just the retailer themselves, but when it comes to design, fit out, and some of the activation opportunities that you have, and the trends that we've learned from some of our experts. So let's start with Daniel, because he's a retailer. And Daniel, you and I have got to know each other a few times. We've been at a MAPIC in France before.
That's right.
And then you and I met in Texas recently as you start looking at the USA for Expo, right?
Yep.
How does a retailer even think about India as a first step? What are the things that they have to go through to decide they want to explore India? Give me your ideas on what are the things you looked at as you decided about thinking about India as an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, I think key is, as you say, is research, and it all starts with the consumer. And this is to understand really how the consumer thinks, but also how the consumer reacts to new things, and really how a consumer acts in different environments. And India is a very big and multicultural society. So for us, the way we look at opportunities is test, talk to consumers, understand what consumers want, also understand what consumers may want or what they aspire to. Secondly, it's infrastructure. You know, in a new country, obviously as a brand, you cannot do it by yourself. You need partnerships. You need to understand what are the right opportunities, where do you want to be, whom to partner with. And I think those are the key things, really. And add to that, particularly as an international brand, what do you need to do to make your brand really, your product range really attractive to the local market? Do you localize it? Local was mentioned before by Jonathan, I believe. Make your brand, make your product range really attractive to a local market and adjust it accordingly.
So, Stephen, you were talking about design, and I can imagine that the design trends have changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID. I can imagine that design changes also are relevant depending on which culture you're talking to, right? Southeast Asia versus India. You mentioned during our conversation that there are certain trends you've seen. I'd love for you to share with this audience the trends that you've seen over the last few years and how those apply towards other people looking at expanding into India.
I think in India, because at the time when I first designing malls in India, it's much more simpler, honestly. Usually 3-4 levels of retail, and then in the middle we try to create something more relates to the outdoor so that people can enjoy some more leisure walk around the whole space. And when the complexity start to evolve, especially in the Asian markets like in Japan, in China, Hong Kong, we start to build the vertical malls like over 10 floors. So what happened to that? Because even in India, as I remember, after level 3, no one will bother to go up any further up. So when it comes to more than 10 floors, what happened? So at that time, either before or after the COVID, people start to think about how to make sure that we can activate the flow so that people can easily go up all the way to enjoy the whole retail atmosphere. These days, the trend we are talking about is the hybridization. We talk at one term called the blending, is the new branding. Means for these days, if you would like to have a strong brand, you need to start to mix up things together. For example, we have mixed something relates to the green, the nature into a shopping mall, creating a botanical garden in one of the atriums. That's the mixing with the nature, or even blend with the technology. We recently were also working with some AGC, anime games company, for example, the Alibaba and also Bilibili in China. So they have been pushing the boundary very harsh because they want to create the first physical store that could integrate AR and VR. So there's something that we always try to immerse ourselves into that dimension to create something more interesting. Or even something more relates to communal, how to, after the COVID, how people can enhance the wellness through the whole retail atmosphere, the ambience, how we can create a lot of this kind of different vibes to the customers. And of course, when it comes to retail, luxury is more important. But apart from super luxury, what else can we provide? We are providing a lot of VVIP service. The butler, at the time when you step into the door, they will have a butler to escort you to go to the lounge and then have a lot of bespoke journey for the customers. So all of this have been evolved. So I can see that for the retail trend, every day is different. So it would be good to have this kind of really good energy and then new vibes and then bring it to the whole retail industry.
So a little while ago, you and I were talking about fit-outs. Of course, there's the design aspect of building a store, right, designing it, but there's the actual practical matter of building it out, fitting it out. In this environment, working in India, for example, or Dubai for that matter, what are some of the differences you've seen from, say, Western Europe and fit-outs, Middle East fit-outs, and what you think are the opportunities for India?
I mean, to start maybe with the items that we all have in common, is everywhere experience became more important, right? In the past, it was more about capex per square meter or return on investment per square meter. Now it's about experience per square meter. And this is the same formula wherever you go, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the Middle East, or whether it's in India. How to do that? Obviously, I don't want to assume that I'm a designer, so I would let him answer these questions. But I think it's important that there's always a local component, a global overall brand identity, with a local attachment to the community and to the customer segment. And we see this also with luxury brands, whether that's the LVMH brands or the Richemont brands. They're doing that in the Middle East. And they're looking for similar details to implement in their stores and boutiques for India as well as in when they enter the market. And we've got a number of cases. I mean, we work with travel retail operators. So we've worked on new Delhi International Airport for the duty-free stores. We worked with Hugo Boss on a number of stores in India. Also just recently with IWC in Jio Mall here in Mumbai. And we can see that they always try to connect to the local community. And obviously from a design point of view, you can make that connection and the distinction as well to other markets and other trends. I mean, I think one of our colleagues mentioned earlier, it's even beyond the design of the store. It's also about the design of the products. They need to be adapted to suit the local needs and requirements.
To the economy and the consumer here in India, right? Yeah. So you mentioned transit and airports as an example, and of course, Mark, you and I were talking about it a little while ago. I mean, transit-oriented retail is a big thing, and we're going to see in certain parts of the world, especially India, where they're continuing to invest in infrastructure and train stations and that kind of thing, the evolution of transit-oriented retail. You have some experience in that. Why don't you share with the group some of the opportunities that exist with flexibility, as you mentioned during our conversation, to ensure that these areas are adaptable?
I think one of the nice things about, we've worked on a few airports around the world, and they have a slightly different model, and because they're very much percentage rent driven, so they work differently with the retailers. But what that allows makes it interesting for us, because we can talk about things that we've always wanted to do, which is about having flexibility in the retail space. So not having a lot of what we do in delivering retail is kind of working out the boring, the pipes and the wires, and making sure that the retailers can fit into the space before we can get to making the retail space great, making that great for the customer and the retailer. So there's definitely trends now where people are looking at, well, how do we create more flexible spaces so that we can right size, we talked about right sizing in the US market, right sizing the spaces in the malls, because a lot of the mall designs that are out there are still designed for a Gap store from the 80s. They're still very big spaces. What we saw during COVID was retailers started to realize, I don't need all that space. I need, I definitely, the customer wants to see and be, touch my product, but I'm paying a lot to have a lot more space than I need. So having the flexibility to move demising walls, having the pipes and wires in the right places is something that, we're seeing it first in the airport sector, but we're also, that's one of the things that we did in Dubai post the GFC, was create a more flexible space so we could put tenants in place very quickly, move them out of the space quickly, and we were able to, there were lots of tenants that wanted to be in the market, but the big spaces, long leases, high rents, didn't allow them to do that. So there were a lot of people that were knocking on the door, but they just didn't have a way in.
Right.
So by making that easier, all of a sudden there was a whole world of new tenants there. So.
If I may add to this
Yes.
point as well, because I think it's very interesting, and I believe the authorities on the real estate side, they have a responsibility as well to not just focus on the commercial gains, but also to focus on the local communities that they are operating in and operating under. And that basically touches also the topic of sustainability. We see a huge trend, and this is also driven by some of the big international luxury brands that are part, in some cases, of the Fashion Pact, which has been initiated by President Macron in France to save the planet, basically. And we see that the need for utilizing local materials, local raw products and fabrics is more and more important also for the international brands. So when the designs are established, this is something that needs to be kept in mind, and the real estate authorities, they have a responsibility to regulate it and enforce it.
So that reminds me of what Jonathan said a while ago about Glocal, right? So we've heard both you, Patrick, reference it, of course, Mark referenced it, Daniel's referenced it, I think even Stephen's referenced it in a different way, which is, at the end of the day, there's an intersection between the global perspective and local execution, right, Jonathan? You mentioned that. You've been in India for quite some time. You've experienced it managing properties in India. Why don't you share with the audience that perspective of having both the global viewpoint as well as the local execution, and how we make sure those marry well for the local people?
Ah, yes, glocal. Global and local. It's remarkable how India's retail and shopping center industries have developed over the last 20 years. And it wouldn't have been possible were the market not to have absorbed what they saw and experienced abroad and to transpose it here in India. In many respects, way more successfully than they're offering abroad. There is something about the Indianness of the retail operation here that is just so appetizing, food-wise, entertainment-wise, and the fact that there are just so many more people here who are prepared to adopt new ideas. This phone thing 20 years ago was the catalyst to so many changes. Who in this audience remembers the word phygital, the confluence of physical and digital? And I had to learn that because I'm a protagonist of physical retail. I understand that people like to be seen and we like to see others. That is a quintessential physical thing. But here in India, we've also got the cell phone. And the cell phone brings so many more international experiences here. Something that was said earlier is how important it is for people to do their research. Not just the sort of research that substantiates an operation here in India, but also the kind of research that exposes the beautiful underbelly of the Indianness of the retail experience here. To know that it's important some days to arrive and wear a sari or a kurta. To know that in this country you eat with your right hand. In this country we do things slightly differently to the way we do it abroad. And by adopting those elements, retailers from abroad will be way more successful than coming in here alone. And from a real estate point of view, as a property practitioner, I'm very conscious as an asset and a property manager that there are really two things on my mind. My job is really, really, really simple. My job, philosophically, is to encourage the retailers to do their job so that when they come into my malls, my destination, Tex Valley Outlet Mall, for instance, in Erode, I'll want them to know that I know that they are there to do their job. And I'm there to protect the asset and to enhance the value of the asset. And in working closely with retailers and working closely with the local customers, we can work magic here.
Magic is the appropriate word. So Daniel, when I saw you in April in London, we met at Leicester Square at your location.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by the energy in the room. So much of that was your vision, I imagine. You had a certain vision for how you wanted that room to be activated and to be looking energetic. Why don't you share with this room here some of the things that you think about when you think about energizing a brand and what that transforms when you think about a different market like India. How will you approach India from an activation standpoint to get people to come in and try a crepe and want to stay for an hour?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you used the word entertainment before, and I think it's a global phenomenon. People want to be entertained, and entertainment for the taste buds is certainly a very important part of that. Your example about our unit in Leicester Square, smack in the middle of London, is a good one, because it comes at the interchange of eating and a certain luxury as well. And I was just thinking about, you were talking about local, Jonathan. I was just thinking about how can we coin something that's really important. Luxury, or a very big trend, luxury and food and beverage. And I was thinking about fluxury. I don't know what you think of it as a new term to put those things together. Coming back to your point, how do you bring energy into it? It's about food, it's about merchandising, but it's particularly about great operational and great execution. So how do you take a product and how do you promote that so that people really want you? So it's visualization. Doing it at the right time, the right moments, rather than overload people with messages they don't understand. And I think particularly for new markets such as India, that we would love to get into, it's all about showing what your product is, not make it too complicated, and focus on those things that are really important today's, when you're looking at the trends. It's, entertainment. People want to be entertained. People want luxury. People want affordability. And make sure that those messages come across in everything you do in your execution. And we try to do that everywhere we go and adjust it to the environment where we are. We are effectively Theatreland, Leicester Square. We're in shopping malls. We are in travel interchanges. The consumer has different kind of aspirations depending on where they are. Make sure not one size fits all, but you adapt your brand and your execution in tune with where you operate. I think that's the key thing.
That's real good. So I had a chance to visit with some from Tata yesterday, and they said that what's really important about Western brands coming to India is that they embrace the Indianness of the consumer, that it can't just be one size fits all. And so I think about maybe in the case of Stephen, you have design attributes that have to take into account India and the way the Indian consumer shops, whether it's the temperature, whether it's the feel, the shopping center, et cetera. Why don't you explain to us a little bit about the things that you think retail property owners as well as retailers need to take into account from a design standpoint to maintain the Indianness of the environment?
I think the most difficult part when it comes to design is how to adapt the design with the local culture. That's more important. Because when we first worked projects in Japan or even in the Philippines, we didn't know those elements, they will be so border of that. For example, like in the Philippines, it's also under very hot weather. So every time when we decide the alfresco dining, outdoor terraces, we feel that it's really good. But somehow they always want to cover it with a huge canopy, even with no glass, all solid metal panel. I think same probably happen as well in India. But I guess it's all about the culture. We probably need to, first of all, understand the market, understand the culture of the people, how they are going to enhance or utilize the space. For outdoor space, it may not be that hot, provided that we do have a lot of systems to control it. Maybe at night time with the breeze, some area could turn into something more pleasant and could be more enjoyable. So I think in terms of the local culture, for us as a designer, I think the more important thing is to create a dialogue. First of all, communicate with the team, with the leasing team, with the client to understand exactly what could be done, what else can we bring it from the other part of the world to see how we can adapt it to the locals. I think that would be something very important because imagine if we want to, as we said before, mix the local with the global, we need to adapt different pros and cons from different sides of the world. So I think that is something is a quite important ingredient which can't be that easily explained. I think it's all about the process at the time when we engage in the design, how we open up a dialogue, understand the culture, and then try to design something that can fit in with the context.
Makes sense. So, go ahead, Mark.
I just wanted to touch on one of the nice things about sitting between both the landlord and the tenant and what we do with Vindico is when a project's successful, and we've done several. The one that comes to mind the most from this point of view was Blue Water, which was over 25 years ago, where we started talking about creating an experience. And on that project, whether it was on the landlord side or on the tenant side, it was still about, the experience was built on a foundation of commercials that made sense, then the environment, which was made up the space and the architecture, but the one that trumped that was always the offer. So you had to have, the retailers, working with the retailers to make sure that the offer worked with, with the landlord space because people are they're coming to see the retail. No one's visiting empty shopping centers. If you don't have great retail, we talk a lot about momentum, having something for them to come. That's how you get up to the top. That's how you get to an experience. Easier for for restaurants sometimes than retailers, but it's strong commercials, a great environment, great offer, and then you get to experience.
Get the experience at the end. So,
Naveen, can I interject and
of course,
add to what Mark has said? Actually, I think that we'll find in India, certainly from 20 years ago, and certainly still today in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, those malls, people are coming to the mall for the mall. They're walking around and they're appreciating the fabulous environment, the architecture, the design, the facilities. They're eating, they're going to the movies, and then they're shopping.
they're staying for a while. Patrick, I know you had a thought you were going to share.
Yeah, two actually. One relating to what Stephen said earlier, to give some actually good examples as well, how brands like Breitling are doing it, for example. Breitling, the new concept is everywhere the same. It looks very uniform. But if you look closely, all these sit-down areas where the sofa is and where these pool billiard tables are set up as Art Deco items, they've got pictures on the walls, pictures that relate to the local community, that relate to a historical landmark in that area. So that's one way of doing it. Another case that I've seen is with Russian brands that are now coming into the Middle East as well. They have the same concept like they have in Russia. It's a perfume and cosmetic brand that I'm talking about, but they use the walls to show wall and street art. In Russia, it's obviously the Russian Cyrillic symbols. In the Middle East, it's the Arabic calligraphy that are being used to create street art. And I think these are ideas that need to be kept in mind when entering a new market. Certainly, the international brands need to keep that in mind when entering India. I'm not the expert on the Indian design features, but this is one way of certainly creating that connection. The other part that I wanted to mention as well is the experience in terms of creating or diversifying the transaction channels for the consumer. So it's, you mentioned in your presentation earlier about the lines getting blurry between the online and the offline. And I think it's, retail is certainly not that. Traditional retail is not that, but the consumer wants to go to the mall, as you say. He wants to go and have dinner there, wants to go to the shop to test and try the product, but he might not make the transaction in the store. He might make it on his phone. And the important factor is how the retailer can capture that transaction, even if that consumer leaves that store. And that's why it's important that any physical bricks and mortar retailer also needs to diversify in the transaction channels that he's offering to the market and offer smart scan and go solutions and so on. So we are an expert on this as well, and we have applications, software solutions that we provide. So that's why we are always excited to guide our customers and clients on that journey.
Jonathan? Yeah.
If I may add to that, we opened a very big mall in Bangalore about 14 years ago. And what we noticed immediately was that at one table for 10, there was one soda with 10 people. And I remember the owner saying to me, "But how can this be? You've got to get 10 people to buy 10 sodas." And my response was, I guess because I'm South African and I come from a complex market, my response was, wait 3 months. And in 3 months' time, he walked through the mall with me, and there were 10 people with 10 sodas, with burgers in this food court. That is the dynamic change that we'll see in this wonderful country.
I agree. So, Mark, we were talking about the fact that you have worked with landlords to take dark spaces and activate them. We know that retail is constantly evolving. You've had experiences in taking these small spaces or large spaces and doing short-term leases for users to activate them. Owners out here could learn a little 2 or 3 things from you in terms of what they should be thinking about for a short-term lease and some of the things you've seen. Why don't you share with the group some things you think they should be thinking about when they have these dark spaces?
Well, I think the big opportunity is, I mean, one of the reasons we're in India is because we love growth markets. We talked about the U.S. is consolidating. It has its own sort of challenges. But when you're in a growth market, there's an opportunity to do things a little bit different than the way they've always been done. And, that's what it was. Well, it was an interesting time in Dubai when we started this, but what we realized, it was tough because landlords didn't care. They already had the rent checks, so they sometimes didn't care that somebody had to walk by 5 empty spaces before they got to a retailer. But because we had worked with that retailer, for a year and a half to get them open and had told them that it was going to be great and it was going to be amazing, we understand that mall environment works much better when you can, retail works in compression. You shop both sides of the mall, all the science that goes into it. But it was it was a challenge. It was an interesting time because of the recession, but we were able to get landlords to understand that activation, having that space active, one, it's easier to rent. So if you're going to open up, you've done a great deal and you've got someone sitting in center court, but they've got 3 vacancies next to them. It's very easy to go out and activate that space, and you can go find some really interesting new tenants because, one of the other challenge we have in the U.S. is that our malls all consolidated into the same brands, getting bigger and bigger. And I could look down a whole wing and there were only 3 stores there. So why do I need to walk down it? Whereas, starting to put these small spaces in, whether you're doing it as permanent tenants, but obviously to be able to do that, just to activate that space, make sure that there's something there for the customer to go and to find and to be interesting. I think the landlords that are willing to kind of think a little more entrepreneurial and try to figure out, well, how do we help these retailers? How do we get a win-win for both of us instead of just going, okay, if I've got some leverage, I'm going to exert it. I'm going to get you to sign a long lease, do all this. Take some, it was great to see those tenants take permanent space. Landlords find a permanent tenant that they never would have.
Yeah, attempt to perm is a wonderful story for a landlord, right? Yeah. So we've got about 2 minutes here. So here's what we're going to say. All of us on this panel here have one thing in common, for sure. We're here for a reason because we think a lot about India in a very positive way. That's why we're here, right? So I would love for all of us to give one bit of advice to our audience, the one takeaway that you think they could benefit from each of your experiences about what we all should be thinking about for India for the next 5 years. Mark, why don't you lead us off? What is it that you see about India that's so positive, so optimistic that makes you think this is the next place for most of the Western world to be thinking about from a growth standpoint?
Well, I think it is. It's just that growth and the fact that, I always liken it, in the U.S. I liken it to traffic when everyone's sort of finding their lane and you're kind of moving around. Here that's a little more prevalent, but you don't have to be stuck with the way that it's always been done. So, and the fact that, most of it is being done locally. It's not full of, one of the things about Dubai, it was all, I could read a lease and I knew right away whether the guy running the project was from Australia, the UK, America. It was all, the more local it's driven and the more entrepreneurial and that the developers can be, the better. So.
Very good. Daniel?
Yeah, and I just want to build on
Mark said.
I'll keep it short, but what Mark said before about making it easier for brands and for their hosts to really try something and get something new in. One example for us is we recently started to partner with Tesco in the UK of setting up stores inside a traditional retail chain. That is sometimes logistically quite difficult for the host, and opportunities such as smaller kiosks that can quickly be built and are very flexible. I think it's an enormous opportunity for brands as well as the larger host brands to do. We're doing similar things in the GCC where we're going to be rolling out with cinema chains. So again, testament to what you were saying. Big idea. I think it's all about, everybody said before, disruption one way or another. If it's disruption, about positive disruption, not for the sake of it. So provide something fun, interesting, but understand the consumer. So you heard it here first, Fluxury food, in luxury. I hope we can coin that one way or another. But this is what we're all about, and I think that will be my piece of
Advice.
advice, if you will. Thank you.
Stephen,
Something simple but hopefully powerful. Embrace and respect the culture, but still needs to be creative.
embrace the culture but be creative. I like that. Jonathan, one bit of advice for the audience here.
Tom Peace's book, I think, perfectly articulates this the way I feel. His title of his book was Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. My response to that is do your research.
Do your research. And Patrick, why don't you close us out?
Yeah, I mean, to the question why India, I think if you compare it with other large economies that may have healthy retail sales as well, they all reached a certain saturation point. Here we are at the beginning, at the start. There's so much potential. There's so much that can be done. From me, from a Middle East perspective, there's two exciting markets actually to look into where this potential of growth is there. One is, of course, Saudi in the Middle East, and obviously much bigger in terms of population is India, and the relation is close. So I'm super excited about the potentials here in this country, and it's unbelievable what power could be emerging from here.
Well, folks, you heard it here from this panelist. Everybody here believes that India is the next great frontier, as do I. So on behalf of MAPIC India, thank you all for joining us today for this conversation. Panelists, thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.